Chicago, 1893. People from all over the world were pouring into the city. Trains arrived at crowded stations, the streets filled with lights, and music echoed from the shores of Lake Michigan. The city was preparing for one of the greatest events in history, the 1893 Chicago World's Fair. But in the same city, on the same nights, another preparation was taking place, silent, hidden, and deadly. This is the story of one man, but also the story of a city's blindness, a century's darkness, and the most chilling side of human nature. Englewood, a growing neighborhood on Chicago's south side. New houses were rising, shops were opening, and the train line connected the district to downtown. The people who moved here wanted a new life. No one knew each other well, but everyone trusted each other. Among the residents was a respected doctor, a polite, well-dressed, charming man. He helped people, offered small loans, spoke kindly to neighborhood children. Those who knew him said he was trustworthy. His name was Henry Howard Holmes. Holmes had purchased a pharmacy in Englewood. Every morning the doors opened, customers stepped inside, and Holmes greeted them with a warm smile. People chatted with him, asked for medical advice, sometimes borrowed money. Holmes almost always helped. The neighborhood liked him. No one asked about his past. In those days, people often changed cities, started new lives under new names. That was normal, but Holmes was not ordinary. As the World's Fair approached, thousands arrived in Chicago. Hotels filled, boarding houses filled, the streets grew crowded. Young women searching for work read newspaper ads. Secretary wanted, stenographer wanted, hotel staff needed. Some of those ads belonged to a doctor in Englewood. Young women came to Chicago, hoping for a better life. Some wrote letters home, saying they had found good jobs, met kind people, started new lives. But after a while, some of those letters stopped. Families were not worried at first. The city was big. Mail could be delayed. People could move away. But weeks turned into months, and questions began. Where is our daughter? Why doesn't our sister write? Why hasn't our friend returned? Those questions disappeared into the crowd of Chicago. In big cities, people often vanished. Some fled debts. Some started new lives. Police saw these disappearances as ordinary, but some of them led back to the same place, to the same man, the doctor in Englewood. Some people who entered Holmes's life were never seen again. Some sent letters claiming they had moved away, but the handwriting looked strange. The signatures were different. The stories did not match. Still, no one suspected him, because Holmes inspired trust. As the fair continued, Chicago nights glowed with lights. Music echoed through crowded streets. People laughed and celebrated. But in the small columns of newspapers, missing person notices began to grow. Missing stenographer, missing secretary, went to Chicago, never heard from again. Meanwhile, Holmes was working on a new plan. He bought the lot next to his pharmacy. He began building a large structure. The neighbors thought it was a hotel for fair visitors. Construction started. Bricks rose. Walls were built. But Holmes kept changing workers. No one ever saw the whole building. The neighbors found nothing strange, because Holmes was a respected doctor. When the summer of 1893 ended, the fair closed. Crowds left. Trains emptied. But some families kept waiting. Their daughters never returned. Their brothers never wrote. Their friends were gone. And all of those disappearances would one day lead to the same man. Henry Howard Holmes. But in those days, no one knew. Holmes still walked the streets smiling, still treated patients, still spoke kindly to neighbors, and no one knew his true identity. When the past of Chicago's respected doctor was investigated, a different name appeared, Herman Webster Mudgett. The man known as Henry Howard Holmes had once been someone else. He was born in 1861 in a small town in New Hampshire. People who knew him remembered a quiet but strange child, intelligent, withdrawn, with a cold expression in his eyes. Years later, they all said the same thing. Herman was different. Stories were told about his fascination with death, about experiments on animals. No one knows how much of this was true, but one thing was clear. Herman struggled to feel empathy for others. He was successful in school, buried in books, especially science and anatomy. The human body fascinated him. That curiosity led him to the University of Michigan Medical School. But in medical school, Herman learned more than anatomy. He learned how systems could be manipulated. Using cadavers from the laboratory, he began small insurance fraud schemes, fake deaths, fake documents, fake identities. These were his first serious crimes. Here he learned an important lesson. If a plan is careful enough, a crime can leave no trace. After graduation, he began moving from city to city, Missouri, Texas, Pennsylvania. In every place he used new names, left debts behind, made suspicious deals, and disappeared. Eventually, Herman Webster Mudgett vanished, and a new man appeared, Henry Howard Holmes. A new name meant a new life. In those days, there were no strict identity checks. People could reinvent themselves easily. Holmes mastered this. He forged documents, invented histories, told convincing stories. But Holmes did not only change his name, he created a character, a polite doctor, a trustworthy businessman, a romantic gentleman. People saw the face he wanted them to see. He married young, then abandoned his wife and child. He promised marriage to other women, borrowed money from partners, cheated investors. For Holmes, people were tools. America was growing rapidly. Railroads were building new cities. Factories needed workers. People moved constantly. In this chaos, hiding the past was easy. Holmes used it perfectly. He traveled endlessly, finding partners, creating schemes, but everywhere the same pattern followed. Debts, suspicion, disappearances. When attention grew, Holmes left town. His intelligence made him dangerous, but his calmness made him deadly. He could study people, understand their fears, their hopes, their dreams, and then use them. Holmes's greatest skill was gaining trust. He listened carefully, learned what people needed, then offered exactly that: a job, an investment, a marriage promise, and then he vanished. There were already missing people in Holmes's past, but in different cities, under different names. No one connected the stories. His true face remained hidden. In the late 1880s, Holmes moved to Chicago, because Chicago was a city of opportunity. With the World's Fair approaching, businesses were growing, hotels were opening, jobs were everywhere. Holmes knew he could disappear into the crowd. In Chicago, he bought a pharmacy. The neighborhood welcomed him. No one asked about his history, because he was now Henry Howard Holmes. But Herman Webster Mudgett was still inside him. The coldness from his childhood, the frauds he learned in medical school, the lies from every city he left behind, all of it became part of a larger plan. That plan would begin in Chicago. When Holmes bought land in Inglewood, he was not just building a business. He was building a system built on trust, deception, and control. Soon, that system would have a name, the Murder Castle. But in those days, no one knew. Holmes was still a respected doctor, still smiling in the streets, and Chicago had not yet seen his true face. When Henry Howard Holmes arrived in Chicago, the city was changing fast. Factories were rising, railroads were expanding, and new neighborhoods were growing every day. People from across America came searching for work, for hope, for a new life. In the chaos of a growing city, it was easy to hide a past, easy to change a name, easy to disappear. Holmes understood this, and he chose Chicago carefully. He settled in Inglewood, a quiet neighborhood on the south side. New homes were being built, shops were opening, and the train line connected residents to downtown Chicago. The people here were honest, hard-working, hopeful. They trusted strangers because they were strangers themselves. Holmes bought a small pharmacy. Every morning the doors opened, customers walked in, and Holmes greeted them with a warm smile. He listened patiently, gave medical advice, sometimes offered small loans, sometimes free medicine. The neighborhood began to respect him. To them, he was a kind doctor, a reliable businessman, a polite gentleman. No one asked about his past, but behind that smile, Holmes was studying people, learning their fears, their dreams, their weaknesses. Some of his employees did not stay long. Holmes said they had found better jobs in other cities. In those days, that explanation was enough. People moved constantly. Letters were lost. Lives changed overnight. But slowly, the number of disappearances grew. Some women who worked for Holmes stopped writing home. Some friends who visited his office were never seen again. Holmes said they had married, moved away, started new lives. Families believed him, at first, because Holmes inspired trust. Neighbors sometimes noticed strange things: late-night deliveries, heavy trunks being carried inside, rooms that stayed locked for days, workers who appeared one week and were gone the next. But no one suspected the doctor. Chicago was too big, too busy, too loud. In the early 1890s, preparations for the World's Fair began. The city exploded with activity. Hotels were full. Boarding houses overflowed. Newspapers were filled with job ads. Secretaries wanted, stenographers wanted, shop assistants wanted. Holmes placed his own ads. Young women arrived in Chicago with hope in their eyes. They wrote letters home, saying they had found work with a respectable doctor. They spoke of new opportunities, of new beginnings. But after a while, some of those letters stopped. Families waited. Days became weeks. Weeks became months. Questions began. Where is our daughter? Why hasn't she written? Why hasn't she come home? Those questions disappeared into Chicago's crowd. Holmes, meanwhile, was planning something bigger. He bought the empty lot next to his pharmacy. He announced he would build a hotel, a place for visitors coming to the World's Fair. The neighbors were excited. Business would grow. Jobs would come. Construction began. Walls rose. Rooms were added. Corridors stretched across the building. But Holmes kept changing workers. No one saw the full design. No one understood the plan. And still, no one suspected him. Because Holmes was a respected doctor. As the World's Fair opened in 1893, Chicago filled with lights and music. Crowds laughed, celebrated, and marveled at the great Ferris wheel. Visitors came and went. Thousands arrived, thousands left, and some never left. Missing person notices appeared in small newspaper columns. Missing stenographer, missing clerk. Last seen in Chicago. No further contact, but these notices were lost among hundreds of others. No one saw the pattern. Holmes's plan continued. This chapter of the story shows how Holmes became invisible, hidden in the crowd, protected by trust, protected by the chaos of a growing city. Chicago did not yet know the truth, but Holmes's building was rising, room by room, wall by wall, secret by secret, and soon the darkest part of this story would begin. A doctor, a neighborhood, and people who vanished. The building rising on Holmes's lot looked ordinary from the outside. Brick walls, wide windows, shops on the ground floor. Neighbors believed it would be a hotel for visitors of the World's Fair, a smart business idea in a growing city. But inside, something very different was taking shape. Construction began quietly. Workers came and went. Carpenters were hired, then dismissed. Bricklayers worked for a few days, then disappeared from the project. No crew ever saw the full plan. No one understood the entire design. This was not an accident. Holmes did not want anyone to know what he was building. From the street, the structure seemed normal, but inside, corridors twisted in strange directions. Some doors locked from the outside. Some rooms had no windows. Some walls were built twice, leaving narrow spaces between them. Holmes controlled every detail. He changed blueprints, moved staircases, added doors where none were expected, removed doors where people needed them. He watched the work carefully, correcting, adjusting, hiding. Neighbors sometimes noticed odd things. Heavy trunks carried inside at night, strange chemical smells, rooms that stayed locked for days, workers arguing about plans they did not understand. But no one suspected the doctor, because Holmes was polite, generous, respected. He smiled at neighbors, gave candy to children, helped the sick, loaned small amounts of money. People trusted him, and trust was the strongest lock of all. As the building grew, Holmes placed more job advertisements. Secretaries wanted, shop assistants needed, hotel staff required. Young women arrived looking for work. Some stayed briefly, some vanished quietly. Holmes always had an explanation. She moved away. She married. She found better work in another city. In the chaos of Chicago, those explanations were believable. Inside the building, Holmes created a system. Doors that could trap a person inside. Corridors that led nowhere. Hidden stairways between walls. A structure designed not for comfort, but for control. Investigators years later would debate how much of the building was real and how much was legend. Newspapers exaggerated many details, but one truth remained clear. The building was not ordinary. Holmes was not building a hotel. He was building an idea, a place where trust could be turned into silence. As the World's Fair opened in 1893, Chicago filled with light and sound. Music echoed through crowded streets. Visitors laughed under electric lamps. The great Ferris wheel turned slowly against the night sky. But in Englewood, behind quiet brick walls, another story was unfolding. Employees came and went. Some were never seen again. Holmes continued to smile, continued to greet customers, continued to act like a respectable doctor. And no one asked questions, because Holmes inspired trust. The building was nearly complete, room by room, secret by secret. Holmes had created something no one fully understood. Soon that building would gain a name, the Murder Castle. But in those days, it was still only a hotel, still only a business, still only the property of a polite doctor named Henry Howard Holmes. and Chicago still did not know his true face. By the summer of 1893, Chicago was glowing with lights. Music filled the streets, crowds laughed under electric lamps, and visitors from around the world filled the hotels. The World's Fair was a celebration of progress, of hope, of the future. But inside Holmes's world, hope was turning into silence. Many of the people who entered Holmes's life were young women searching for work, secretaries, stenographers, shop assistants. They answered newspaper ads placed by a respectable doctor in Inglewood. They came to Chicago with dreams of independence, of opportunity, of a better life. Some wrote letters home, describing their new job, their kind employer, their plans for the future. Their families were proud, relieved, happy. But then, the letters stopped. One of those women was Julia Connor. She worked in Holmes's pharmacy. She was intelligent, friendly, and trying to build a new life. Holmes paid attention to her, spoke kindly, offered help, promised opportunity. Soon, Julia disappeared. Holmes told neighbors she had moved away, that she had found a new life in another city. But Julia's family never heard from her again. Another name was Emmeline Sigrand, a young stenographer who came to Chicago for work. She wrote cheerful letters to her friends, saying she had found a good position with a charming doctor. She spoke about marriage, about plans, about happiness. Then, silence. Holmes said she had married, that she had moved west, that she was happy, but no one ever saw Emmeline again. These stories were repeated again and again. New employees arrived, new friendships began, new promises were made, and then disappearances. Some victims were not employees, some were investors, some were partners in Holmes's schemes, men who trusted him, who believed in his business ideas, who lent him money. They too vanished. Holmes always had explanations. He was calm, convincing, polite. He wrote letters pretending to be the missing person. He invented stories. He erased doubts. In a city as large as Chicago, these disappearances did not seem connected. People moved constantly. Mail was slow. Lives changed quickly. Families hoped their loved ones were simply starting over. But the truth was darker. Holmes understood loneliness. He understood ambition. He understood hope. And he used those feelings like tools. Many of his victims were far from home, alone in a big city, trusting the only person who offered help, trusting a smiling doctor who seemed safe. That trust became their silence. Newspaper columns began to fill with missing person notices. Missing secretary, missing clerk, last seen in Chicago. No reply to letters, no trace found. But there were too many names, too many stories. No one saw the pattern. Holmes continued living as a respected citizen, greeting neighbors, running his pharmacy, planning new investments, speaking kindly to strangers, and still people disappeared. This chapter of the story reminds us that every victim had a life, a family, a future. They were not just names in a newspaper. They were people who trusted, people who hoped, people who believed. Holmes took those hopes and turned them into silence. But his perfect plan would not last forever. One mistake, one partnership, one insurance scheme would expose everything. The name of that mistake was Benjamin Peterzel, and with him, the investigation would finally begin. A doctor, a building, and lives that vanished into the crowd.
Holmes had spent years living on lies, small frauds, fake names, borrowed money that was never returned,
But the building in Inglewood was expensive. His plans were growing, and Holmes needed more money than ever before. So he turned to a bigger idea: insurance fraud. Benjamin Pitezel was Holmes's partner, a carpenter, a man struggling with debts, desperate for a way out. Holmes offered him a plan: a fake death, a body made unrecognizable, an insurance payout they would share. In those days, life insurance systems were new. Identification was weak. Records were scattered. The plan seemed simple, but Holmes never planned to share anything. In 1894, news came from Philadelphia: an explosion, a dead man, the body burned beyond recognition. Holmes claimed it was Benjamin Pitezel and filed for the insurance money. At first, everything seemed to work, but the insurance company grew suspicious. There were too many strange details, too many missing records, too many lies in Holmes's past. The company hired detectives to investigate. One name would change everything: Frank Gaia. Gaia was patient, careful, relentless. He studied Holmes's letters, his train tickets, his false names. He followed every trail, city by city, address by address. He discovered that Holmes had traveled with Pitezel's children, moving them between hotels, writing letters in their names, telling different stories in every city. Then, the children disappeared. Gaia continued searching: Indianapolis, Detroit, Toronto. In a quiet house in Toronto, the truth began to surface: small bones hidden in the cellar. The discovery shocked the nation. Holmes was arrested. At first, the charge was insurance fraud, but as investigators dug deeper, stories of missing people began to connect. Names from Chicago, names from other cities, names that all pointed back to the same man, Henry Howard Holmes. Newspapers exploded with headlines: the monster doctor, the World's Fair killer, the owner of the murder castle. America read every detail with horror. Police returned to Inglewood, searching Holmes's strange building, examining rooms, corridors, locked doors, trying to understand what had happened inside those walls. The legend of the murder castle was born. Some stories were exaggerated, some details unclear, but Holmes's crimes were real. Frank Gaia's investigation became famous. He had followed paper trails across states, connected false identities, uncovered hidden truths. His work changed how detectives hunted criminals. Holmes had made one mistake: greed. He wanted more money, faster, bigger, and that mistake destroyed his perfect mask. Now Holmes was no longer a respected doctor. He was a suspect, a criminal, a man whose secrets were finally coming into the light. The investigation was not finished. The court would decide his fate, and the world would soon hear his name again. By late 1894, Henry Howard Holmes was no longer just a suspected fraud. His name was now connected to missing people, to strange stories, to unanswered questions that reached across cities. Frank Gaia's investigation had opened a door, and behind that door, something dark was waiting. Holmes was arrested, calm and composed. Witnesses said he showed no fear, no panic, as if he had expected this moment, as if he believed he could still control the story. But this time, the story was bigger than him. Police returned to Inglewood, to the large brick building beside Holmes's pharmacy. The neighbors watched as officers entered the place they had passed every day, never knowing what might be inside. From the outside, it still looked like an ordinary hotel. Inside, it was a maze. Corridors twisted in strange directions. Some doors opened only from the outside. Some rooms had no windows. Hidden stairways appeared between walls. Spaces led nowhere, and everywhere. Investigators struggled to understand the design. Blueprints were missing. Rooms had been altered. Locks had been changed. It was a structure built for confusion, built for control. Newspapers called it the Murder Castle. Headlines described secret chambers, gas lines, hidden rooms, torture devices. Some stories were exaggerated, some were never proven, but one truth remained clear. The building was not ordinary. Neighbors were shocked. They remembered Holmes as a polite doctor, a friendly businessman, a man who helped children and greeted everyone with a smile. No one believed he could be at the center of such horror. But the evidence kept growing. Names of missing employees, missing visitors, missing partners, all connected to Holmes, all connected to Inglewood. Police searched basements, opened locked safes, examined every corridor. Every discovery made the story darker. Holmes sat in his cell, speaking calmly to reporters, denying some crimes, admitting others, changing his story again and again. He wanted control, even now, even with the truth closing in. Because for Holmes, truth was just another tool. The discovery of the building terrified America. People realized something chilling. Monsters do not always hide in shadows. Sometimes they wear suits. Sometimes they smile. Sometimes they are trusted doctors. Holmes's mask was falling away. But one question remained. How many victims were there? No one could answer. Newspapers guessed. Rumors spread. Numbers grew. Some said dozens. Some said hundreds. The truth was lost in fear and legend. But the trial was coming, and the world would soon watch as Henry Howard Holmes faced judgment. In 1895, the trial of Henry Howard Holmes began. Reporters crowded the courtroom. People filled the benches. Families of the missing waited in silence. The nation wanted answers. Holmes entered calmly, dressed neatly, his face controlled. Witnesses said he looked more like a businessman than a murderer. He sat quietly, listening, as his life was told piece by piece. Prosecutors spoke first. They described fake names, insurance fraud, missing partners, and the strange building in Inglewood. They called witnesses who had known Holmes, employees, neighbors, former friends. Then Frank Geyer took the stand. He spoke slowly, carefully, describing his search across cities, the train tickets, the letters, the false identities. He told the story of Benjamin Petersil and the children who vanished. He described the discovery in Toronto. The courtroom fell silent. Holmes watched, expressionless. The defense tried to deny everything. They said Holmes was only a businessman, a victim of rumors, a man blamed by newspapers hungry for headlines. Holmes himself spoke, calmly, confidently, rejecting some accusations, admitting small frauds, denying murder. Then, something unexpected happened. Holmes began talking to reporters in prison. He gave interviews, told stories, sometimes claiming innocence, sometimes confessing. He said he had killed 27 people, then later denied it, changed numbers, changed details. He wanted to control the truth. For Holmes, even confession was a performance. Witnesses described his charm, his politeness, his lies. Some cried as they spoke of missing daughters, missing brothers, missing friends. The courtroom felt heavy with grief. The jury listened, day after day, story after story, until the pattern became clear. Holmes was guilty. In 1895, the court sentenced him to death. When Holmes heard the verdict, he did not scream, he did not beg. Witnesses said he nodded quietly, as if accepting a simple business decision, as if nothing had changed. But everything had changed. As the execution approached, newspapers told his story again. His childhood, his medical school, his pharmacy, his strange building. His name became one of the most feared in America. In May 1896, Henry Howard Holmes was executed. His last request was strange. He asked for his coffin to be filled with cement, so his body could never be disturbed. Perhaps he feared grave robbers. Perhaps he knew his legend would continue. Holmes was gone, but the questions remained. How many victims were there? What truly happened inside the building? How much was truth and how much was myth? The trial had ended, but the mystery had not.
When Henry Howard Holmes was executed, many believed the story had ended. The killer was gone. The trial was over. Justice had been done. But in truth, the story was only beginning. After Holmes's death, newspapers continued to write about him. Each article added new details, new rumors, new horrors. Some claimed he killed dozens. Others said hundreds. The murder castle became a symbol of fear. Truth and legend began to mix. Holmes himself had confessed to 27 murders, then denied them, then changed his story again. Investigators could prove only a few deaths. The rest were lost in missing records, lost in time, lost in myth. The building in Inglewood was destroyed soon after. Fire damaged it. Later, it was demolished. A full investigation was never completed. Evidence disappeared. Witnesses forgot. Documents were lost. Only stories remained. In the 20th century, Holmes's name appeared in books, plays, films, documentaries, each telling added new shadows, new secrets, new terror. Holmes became more than a criminal. He became a legend, but historians kept searching for the truth. They studied newspapers, compared police reports, traced the names of missing people, trying to separate fact from fiction. They discovered Holmes was not only a murderer, he was also a master conman, a manipulator who used charm, intelligence, and lies, a man who understood trust and destroyed it. Psychologists later studied his behavior. They saw patterns, lack of empathy, obsession with control, talent for deception. Holmes could read emotions, but he did not feel them. That made him dangerous. Holmes's story also revealed something about the world around him. Cities were growing fast. People moved constantly. Identity checks were weak. Police systems were new. In that chaos, a man like Holmes could hide. But his crimes changed things. Investigations became more organized. Records improved. Insurance companies created stricter rules. Detectives learned to track criminals across cities. Holmes helped shape modern criminal investigation. Today, in Inglewood, there are ordinary buildings, streets, shops, cars passing every hour. Nothing remains of the strange hotel that once stood there. But the story survives in old newspaper pages, in police archives, in whispered conversations, and in the memory of a nation. Holmes reminds us of something unsettling. Monsters do not always look like monsters. Sometimes they smile. Sometimes they help neighbors. Sometimes they wear a suit and tie, and we trust them. The line between legend and truth may never be clear, but one thing remains certain. In May 1896, on a quiet morning, witnesses gathered inside a prison yard. Reporters opened their notebooks. Guards stood in silence. A man was about to face the end of his story. Henry Howard Holmes. For years he had lived as a respected doctor, smiling at neighbors, helping customers, building trust, and behind that trust, he built lies, secrets, and death. Holmes walked calmly toward the gallows. Witnesses said his face showed no fear, no panic, only a strange calm, as if he had accepted his fate, as if he believed his story would continue even after he was gone. His final request was unusual. He asked that his coffin be filled with cement, so his body would never be disturbed. Perhaps he feared revenge, perhaps he feared curiosity, or perhaps he knew his legend would outlive him. When Holmes died, many people felt relief. Newspapers wrote that justice had been served. The monster was gone. The danger was over. But the questions remained. How many victims were there? What truly happened inside the building? How much was truth? And how much was myth? The murder castle was gone, burned, demolished, replaced by ordinary buildings. But the memory stayed. In newspapers, in police reports, in history books, and in the minds of people who heard this story. Holmes became more than a criminal. He became a warning, a reminder that evil does not always hide in darkness. Sometimes it walks in daylight. Sometimes it smiles. Sometimes it earns trust. Sometimes it wears a tie. This story is not only about one man. It is about a city that did not see, about a time that did not question, about trust given too easily, and truth discovered too late. In Inglewood today, people walk past shops and houses, cars pass quietly, children play in the streets. Nothing remains of the strange building that once stood there, but the story still lives, in the silence between questions, in the pages of old newspapers, in the fear we feel when we remember, because some stories never truly end. They become lessons, they become warnings, they become history. Henry Howard Holmes is gone, but his story reminds us of something simple and chilling. Monsters do not always hide in shadows. Sometimes they wear a smile, a doctor, a hotel, and people who vanished